Welcome to Cool Tunes for a Hot Planet, the podcast where music inspires action for social and climate justice.
Hi, and welcome to Cool Tunes for a Hot Planet. I'm Warren Senders, and this is episode 32, season 2. Before we get started, please take a minute to hit those like and subscribe buttons so we can continue to bring you inspiring activist music all year round. It's happened for all of us, that defining moment when the climate crisis came into sharp relief and we realized that the rest of our lives would be spent facing it. The musical responses to climate change are incredibly varied and beautiful. In this episode, we'll meet bassist and composer Jason Davis, who's found a unique pathway that integrates his musical and scientific backgrounds with voices and stories from all around the world. I interviewed him on Zoom in early December, and it's a pleasure to share his multifaceted art and activism with you today. Hi, and welcome to Cool Tunes for Hot Planet. With me today is Jason Davis. Jason is the director of Climate Stories Project, a multimedia educational and consciousness-raising effort that links climate change and music with personal narrative. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. We're looking forward to getting into your work.
Great, thanks Warren. We're happy to be here. My hope is that these workshops that we lead gives people some confidence and some agency in having those conversations.
You know, the glaciers are leaving me. They're leaving us.
We've had to adapt whenever the temperatures or the flooding or the erosion happens.
It's such a beautiful place. Such a beautiful place.
Our land, our ocean is part of the people. And we are the people we are because of it.
The field of climate art has really exploded the past couple decades. So there's so many artists working in that medium, very broad medium. So not just musicians, but playwrights, visual artists, fiction writers. It's almost too many people to name, but collectively, the fact that climate change you can express climate change through art, to me is that's very close to my core beliefs, my core values.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the statistics and the science or the very dispiriting politics, at least in the US. But there's something uplifting, I think, and powerful about taking a pretty heavy, sometimes abstract issue like climate change and putting it in an artistic medium.
When was the point of decision for you in addressing climate change and incorporating that into your art?
My background is in music and environmental studies and ecology. It felt kind of like my life was pulled in two different directions, and I wanted things to be more centered. And so I just started thinking about ways to express environmental issues through music. At that time, there was some projects underway, and most of them had to do with data sonification,
Mm-hmm.
taking data, scientific data of any type, assigning some musical parameter to those data points, like pitches or rhythms, and then writing music with the data embedded in the music in a way. And I found the approach interesting, but I didn't find it moved me very much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just gets to the larger issue of how do we communicate climate change. And often it's through statistics and data, and that's important. The science is super important, but for many people, it can be really hard to relate to that data as something like personal or tangible or closely related to their life. So I was already working with some oral history projects focused around the environment, and I was studying the connection between the local communities in Monteverde, Costa Rica, and the protected area network. And I just got really interested in people's stories. Just the act of interviewing people really got me interested in the whole way that people talk about their connection to the environment. Like on a very personal level. So I heard all sorts of stories from elders, really, like how the environment's changed, and like I was just recording all these thinking this is for my research project, but the actual process and the stories themselves were really fascinating. So that seed was already planted in my head about storytelling, oral history, and the environment. So getting back to the music thing, when I started thinking about climate change and music, that piece was already there. Like how do people talk about climate change from this more personal level? And the third piece was listening to Steve Reich's piece, Different Trains.
From Chicago to New York. From Chicago to New York. From Chicago.
Basically, Steve Reich is a minimalist composer, American composer. His very first work, like that got known, was very much about manipulating voice samples and this phase shifting thing. But by this time he did Different Trains, he was really looking for a storytelling approach. And that piece like just really blew my mind. I listened to that over and over and over again. So it all kind of came together around 2012, 2013, and I thought this is a cool approach, to take like climate change, oral history, storytelling, voice samples, and music, and trying to put them together in some way.
I see is what I
Ice is what I remember most about my youth.
like Amir. It was a way of life.
It was just a way of life that I thought would never end.
It was just crystal. I remember what ice is.
It's just crystal.
A mirror is what I remember. A way of life. It was a way.
The ice is like a mirror.
I thought would never end.
Tell me a little bit about Ice is What I Remember.
So I was at a youth climate summit in Tupper Lake, New York, at a place called the Wild Center. And I also met this guy, Joseph Dumoulin. He was, an older gentleman at the time I interviewed him. And he mentioned growing up around the same area, like right by the Canadian border, winter for him was extremely important. And especially he would play ice hockey with his buddies on these frozen ponds. It wasn't like an ice skating rink or anything. It was just guaranteed the pond was going to freeze. And that's what you did in the winters. You got out and played ice hockey on these ponds. So that was his recollection about things and how that's changed. And now, like, if there's ice, it's pretty unreliable and not recommended to go out there to play hockey. phrase that stood out to me is that he said, ice is what I remember most about my childhood. Right? So that phrase stood out to me as a very poetic description of the impacts of climate change. And to make it more interesting, there's an Eric Satie piece. I was listening to that piece, and something about, I don't know, the title Vexations like really got me. And so I took part of the Vexations theme and arranged it for the bass and the voice in harmony and parts. And it kind of got looser as you went along. The visual image is like ice is very solid and strong, and then as it's melting, it becomes more like water. So the phrasing, the vocal phrasing gets looser. So the singer has to interpret that, like what pitches they sing, it's really up to them, but something about the visual notation influences it.
It was gone. Ice is what I remember.
Jason's work building a library of first-person climate stories allows participants to learn about the issue in ways that move beyond statistics. In his workshops and trainings, he gives students the tools and resources to collect stories from the people they meet wherever they go. And the Climate Stories Project website includes narratives from all over.
So I'm Jason Davis. I'm the director of Climate Stories Project. Today we're doing a workshop about climate storytelling. So we have students here from ETSU, we have people from the public, and we're just learning about what climate storytelling is and why it's so important. So the basic approach is we need to tell climate stories because without talking about climate change, it's going to be really hard to confront this crisis that we have. So we're having everyone think about what's their climate story in terms of what are they observing on the ground in their home place, how do they feel about that with their emotions, and also how can they make a difference towards a more positive future. People do a little brainstorming, they write their story, they also get a chance to share with a partner, and we get to share with the whole group of people as well. And then hopefully after that, people want to continue with the process, writing their stories and submitting it to share on the Climate Stories Project website. This feels like a good place for me to be, is encouraging people to have these conversations that can be difficult about climate change, thinking about what our stories are, trying to really connect to what it feels like to experience climate change in the real world and not just as an abstract idea. So the workshops are super fun, people are really energized, and we've done them in schools, we've done them in libraries and museums, and it just keeps growing. So it's just great to be here, and I hope you want to continue to be involved. Say you've lived in the same town for decades, like almost everyone can reflect on things that have changed, and I'm from Massachusetts. And certainly, like I can remember winters being much more intense and way more snow and freezing cold weather.
Right.
So we used to go like ice skating on Walden Pond as a kid. It just felt like this is winter, very profoundly cold, like freezing cold. The ice was super solid. It came every year or almost every year. Now I don't know the last time that lake's frozen over. So I mean, even like that's an example of a climate story, or a piece of a climate story is just a recollection, a memory, a description. We try to get people to be specific too, and this can be hard with climate change because it can be abstract. So sometimes when we're doing these workshops, we help people formulate a story. We have a prompt, we have a 3-part prompt structure we use. So the first part is about connecting to your home place. So that for me, that could be Massachusetts, or I might want to talk about Walden Pond. The second prompt is about emotions people have about climate change, and that's a big range of emotions from grief to anxiety to hope or excitement about the future. Like it's almost always a bit of a mess with the emotions, and that's the way it should be. And then the third prompt is about motivation. Like why are you or how are you motivated to confront climate change and some of these positive actions we can take. Mm-hmm. So it's a suggested structure. The story doesn't have to follow that structure, but it's a good starting point.
My name is Georgia. I'm Italian, but I live in the Czech Republic. But my climate story starts in the Arctic. In 2023, I started traveling to Svalbard, and on my first trip there, we got off a boat to walk on sea ice. I got to speak with our guide, a Norwegian who'd been living on Svalbard for decades, and I asked him what the state of the sea ice cover was. He told me that when he moved to Svalbard, he could ride his snowmobile all the way across the fjord, which now is no longer possible.
There was a 100-mile-an-hour wind, and a fire arose and burned
So my name is Emma. I'm 21 years old, and I'm a student in France. I'm currently living, in fact, in the south of France, so for my fourth year of study.
And so there's a lot of things that I fear losing if we lose salmon. But I want to be hopeful that maybe our common reliance on salmon can unite us across our differences.
I am a graduate student studying climate change and energy because my country faces many environmental challenges because of climate change.
Na baadaye kulitokea mafuriko kidogo, na baadaye ikakauka tena, na kuona kwamba hata wanyama majirani humu wanazunguka kwa ajili ya ufugaji, wanyama wengi walikufa.
I am a hunter-gatherer, and I provide for families and elders the best food I can get off the land and from the water as well. We are seeing some incredible climate change events today. My traditional homeland in Malaguat is quickly eroding away in the last 160 years.
There has been a complete change in weather patterns, which actually means that springtime is not springtime anymore.
Eventually, flora and fauna, which surround my beautiful village, is vanishing day by day.
I've lived in Shanghai for a long time, but I have noticed that the weather in the city is becoming more extreme, with very hot summers and very cool winters. It worries me a lot because it has an undeniable impact on our environment.
Yes, I am fearful of the future, fearful of the consequences. And the worst part is, indirectly I am participating in this system.
The mountains I saw growing up are the same mountains I'm looking at as I record this. These mountains are known as Cerros La Ventolera, which is translated as windy peaks. As you can imagine by their name, it's very windy here. At 4,300 feet of elevation, it's fairly...
Apart from this, I've realized that we all have a purpose on this planet, and mine is to educate and communicate the community about sustainable practices.
What I see is patterns of unpredictability. So the patterns are changing, not just events changing, but patterns are changing and it's less predictable.
冬取れる魚が例えば早くね秋に取れたりとか、夏取れる魚が春に取れたりとか、その時期が変わってる。春夏秋冬が狂っちゃってる。
Over the years, doing these workshops with schools, a lot of teachers have asked me about actual curriculum or lesson plans they can use around climate storytelling. So finally, we got a little bit of grant funding to do this project of making curriculum modules for teachers. So it could be K through 12 or university teachers to do some kind of work with climate storytelling in the classroom. So that involves things like using recorded stories on the Climate Stories Project website to analyze climate change or understand climate change, or having the students record their stories or interview people. So that's in the works, hopefully should be ready in a few months. And that'll be developing as we go. People will be giving input and I'm excited about that too.
A week spent working with students and interviewing community members in Shishmaref, Alaska, yielded many stories and the inspiration for one of Jason's most moving musical creations, Footsteps in Snow, built around the voice of Inuit elder John Sinnok.
was young, when I was young, we have always had north wind. We have always had north wind all the time.
So I was in this town, very small town called Shishmaref in western Alaska. It's on the Bering Sea, a mile or so off the mainland. I was up there in Shishmaref for about a week, and I was working with students, high school students. There was a class that was looking at climate change locally. They've been on the front lines for decades now, mostly because the town used to have a lot more, offshore there was a lot more sea ice because the temperatures were colder, and a lot of that sea ice is not reliable, or it's just gone in the wintertime. You get a lot more coastal erosion, and that's just eaten away at this island to the point where buildings have been destroyed, sewer lines, water, infrastructure.
And we would have blizzards. And we would have blizzards. And cold north winds for a good month. Cold north winds for a good month.
There's also, like most of northern Alaska, is permafrost, which is frozen soil, and that's been melting. It's also causing a lot of damage. So they're definitely in the climate refugee status. The villagers have voted to move from the island of Shishmaref onto a part of the mainland. It's very likely that this community will be forced to move in the next 10 years or so. And a lot of Inuit communities all up and down the coast of Alaska are in exactly the same predicament.
And it would be like that for a long time. And it would be like that for a long time. But after that, the snow gets so cold. The snow gets so cold.
Is this going to mark the vanishing of a way of life?
That's a good question. I know people there want to maintain the community regardless of where they are, but it's tough. But it's people's homeland for generations. You know, talking to John Sinnok, and he's lived in this community since he was a child. He really knows the environment, and especially like ice conditions are super important. So, like a lot of Inuit communities, hunting is crucial to their survivals, especially seal hunting. So to do that reliably, they need sea ice, kind of like a polar bear does to hunt seal. So because that sea ice is gone or a lot less thick, it's dangerous or not possible to hunt the seal. Even things that outsiders wouldn't even think about, like a wind direction. You know, we don't think about climate change changing the direction of the wind. At least I didn't think about that. But there, it was a navigational aid. Like you could look across the sea ice and see the snowdrifts piled up in these lines because of the winds, and that was part of how you navigated over the ice. But now, because of this climate change, the wind is coming from a lot of different directions, and there's no longer this reliable navigation for these snowdrifts. And to me, that was just like an incredible detail.
That you can hear people walking outside. You could hear their footsteps outside. Nowadays, it doesn't get that hard anymore where you can hear people walking past. The snow doesn't get that hard dry anymore like it used to.
You remember when he was a child, like the sound of people walking on the snow was very sharp and very distinct because it was so cold, and the snow was really dry and crunchy. But now that it's been warmer, the snow is wetter and it doesn't make that same sound. But I was studying some traditional Inuit music at the time I wrote this. I was doing a doctorate in music at McGill University. Two styles of Inuit music which are really important. One is drum dance singing. So that's a tradition where usually a hunter will go out in the land, and while they're hunting or while they're on the land by themselves, they compose a song. And it might have to do with, the song might be about the snow or the feeling of being out in the land. And then when they get back to their people, they teach the song to the other people in their community. And the drum dance is a dance where there's one person playing a frame drum. It's a big hoop drum originally made of whalebone and animal skin, and it's played with a beater, and the drum, you rotate the drum back and forth, and so it's a kind of it's a really booming, resonant kind of a sound. And that's the dancer. The drummer is dancing to interpret this song, and then the rest of the people are singing. It could also be a competition, so people will write like competing songs, and sometimes they even like kind of make fun of each other. So but drum dancing is a really interesting tradition, and some of the songs are really beautiful. And I made a adaptation for this drum dance song for double bass.
Back when I was young, we have always had north wind all the time.
Tell me a little bit about the Council of Trees.
That piece was my first attempt at writing a purely electronic piece. I read a story in Orion magazine by a writer and playwright named Jessica Lynn Peterson. She talked about climate change, but in a very poetic way. Like it was very much about her experience of winter, especially where she grew up, and some of the ways things were getting strange, and so I contacted her, and she did it. She wrote something out, and she wrote a beautiful climate story and just recorded her voice. And trees are very wise beings. So that the name Council of Trees came from thinking about that.
My name is Jessica Lind Peterson, and I currently live in northeastern Minnesota in a small township called Canyon on the shores of a beautiful little lake. I spent my childhood summers in this area and recently relocated here from the Twin Cities at the start of the pandemic. The forests are filled with black spruce, soaring red pine, balsam fir, clusters of birch, and velvety swaths of tamarack. The air here even smells green. I am conditioned for extreme weather, extreme cold, extreme amounts of snow. And while things up north here are still extreme, it feels different now. There's a weird edge to each season that feels unfamiliar. Lakes freeze later and thaw earlier. Birds fly back sooner. Instead of steady rainfall in the spring and summer, we are seeing fewer, more devastating storms with intense rainfall. I sent my small son outside to shut the chicken coop as a storm rolled in. Just as he closed the door to the coop, hail the size of tangerines pelted down. The wind was like a god blowing everything sideways. Giant red pines bowed down and snapped in the middle like matchsticks. It only took a few minutes. The consensus from our neighbors was the same. They'd never seen anything like this. A familiar sentiment these days. As majestic as the forests here still are, I've noticed that they've changed. Up north, acres upon acres of birch and balsam fir are dying rapidly. Invasive beetles are getting too cozy. The winter's no longer cold enough to kill them off. After all the harm we have done, I have a hard time being optimistic. I feel responsible and sad and anxious for the future. It doesn't seem our leaders care that we are killing the very planet that sustains us. I don't know what could be more important than saving it. Here, up in northern Minnesota, there are things we can do. As the climate becomes less suitable for black spruce, birch, and tamarack, local forestry experts are urging private landowners to plant eastern white pine, bur oak, and maple, trees better suited for warmer weather. I don't like the idea of changing the forests, of disrupting what is natural, but deep down, I know it must be done. The luxury of time is no longer a thing. And so, that is what we will do. We will roll up our sleeves and clean up our own mess. We will take our chainsaw back into the woods and cut up the dead, split it, turn what was once a towering giant into small bundles of firewood, and use it to warm our cabin this winter.
Jason's artistic exploration also led to dance and a collaboration with choreographer Rose Pasquarello-Beauchamp, built around the personal narratives of her students at the University of Rochester. You'd sent me a video of a dance piece called, I believe, Bounce.
Also through my connection with the Wild Center, which is where that Youth Climate Summit is, I was put into contact with two teachers from University of Rochester up in upstate New York. And one of them is a choreographer and the other one is a stage designer. So we got talking about putting together some kind of a collaborative project. So my idea was, we'll work with the choreographer's dance students, and I can lead a climate stories workshop with them, record their climate stories, write a piece of music which incorporates their stories, and then the choreographer will make a choreographed dance for them, and the stage designer will create the backdrop for this piece.
The intense seasons were a huge part of my childhood.
Nature and the outdoors are very central to who my parents are as people.
The fluffy white blanket that completely engulfs the grass, sidewalks, and streets.
We get to experience all of the different seasons throughout the year.
I remember finding something to love about each of them.
I still remember September 20th, 2017, as if it was yesterday.
It was performed at the University of Rochester in beginning of 2024.
I did not sleep the whole night as the strong winds kept me awake, and I was scared of what would happen.
And I think it tells a nice story with this added element of dance, which I hadn't worked with before, and I got really interested in dance, and how that could tell these stories as well.
As I looked out the window the next morning, I saw the palm trees and my neighbor's ceiling gone.
I loved working with dancers and choreography and the visual aspect too, video, sound. That's really where I feel like I can make the most difference and where my creative juices really get flowing. So I'll continue in that vein for sure.
My brother told me that when he steps outside, he can smell the acrid scent of the fires from the charcoal. My dad has also told us about how he's been fighting these fires. It honestly scares me. What if the next call I get is because my cousin was injured or worse?
A 2024 journey to Brazil opened up yet another pathway.
I've been really interested in Brazil for a long time. I just started going down there for trips and studying music. I applied to do a Fulbright, and I ended up getting to go down there to do the project in 2024. So I got interested in forest conservation, and especially things like ecological rehabilitation, reforestation, and that's going on all over the world, and it's very inspiring. And I feel like it's a really positive part of the difficult situation we're in. Is a lot of people are working to rehabilitate forests, and we know forests are important for biodiversity, for water conservation, for climate mitigation. People are working on bringing those back. So the Mata Atlântica is a perfect example of that, where it's been very heavily fragmented, but people are working to connect forest fragments and replant native species. Mata Atlântica is the Atlantic rainforest. It's incredibly biodiverse and has a lot of endemic species. And those are species which are not found anywhere else on Earth. But it's also been damaged over centuries, since Portuguese colonization in 1500. So now it exists in these little fragments, but they're still really important for endangered species, things like soil conservation, protecting water supplies, and it surrounds the largest cities in Brazil of Sao Paulo and Rio. So those cities are actually in the Mata Atlântica. You might not know it if you're standing in the middle of Sao Paulo, but it's actually like in this rainforest. So I was in Sao Paulo quite a lot, but I got to travel around, and I did interviews with different traditional fishing communities, Guarani native communities, people who are working in conservation and environmental education, around the theme of the importance of the forest, of the Mata Atlântica in their lives and their community, and how important it is to preserve it. For a lot of it, I was traveling around by boat, and there's a lot of shots of boat movements and some city scenes to show that, like, Rio is part of the Atlantic rainforest, and just a mix of different scenes, along with these interviews and the original music.
Então essa terra é dos Guarani.
Meu nome é Demésio Martini, cacique Vandera, daqui do município de Paraty, aldeia Rio Pequeno, Tecurradieri. Quem segura a natureza é os índios. Água boa, mata, remédio, moradia, é tudo a natureza que os índios não querem que acaba, porque a gente vive pela natureza. Todo mundo vive pela natureza. Alimento vem da natureza. Toda coisa que a gente usa aqui na terra vem da natureza, é da natureza.
Jason, is there anything that you really want people to know?
Well, I mean, I would recommend that people find a way to engage with an issue like climate change, as difficult as that is, and it could be different for everybody. So you don't have to be a on the street protester. If that's your thing, that's great. We need that too, right? We need the direct action, but if you want to make a difference, as I said before, just having that conversation with your colleague or your uncle or your kids or about climate change and what it means to you and how you're motivated to confront it in some way, that's a great step. So and action brings about some kind of hope, or it often goes that direction, like instead of having hope first and then taking the action.
Right.
Often like you just do something. Planting a tree is an action, and then that builds a sense of community and a sense of efficacy, and so start small.
Jason Davis, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed our conversation and I've learned a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much, Warren. Great to talk to you.
To learn more about Jason's work, you can visit his website at climatestoriesproject.org. Perhaps you'll be inspired to add your own story to their continually expanding archive. Please remember to like and subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about this podcast. For the credits, we'll hear Jason's piece, We Can Do Hard Things, featuring the voice of environmental activist Yvette Stewart. I'm Warren Senders, and this has been Cool Tunes for a Hot Planet, Episode 32, Season 2. Thank you for listening.
Movements do not rally around despair. They rally to hope. Nothing will come of only focusing on uncertainty and fear. The climate crisis was not created by a single individual, and it will not be solved by a single individual. It will take collective effort to change the course of the future. Community, commitment, care are what's called for. I keep learning about my role in this race for climate justice. And I show up for all of it. The joy, the sorrow, the love, the fear.